Writing short stories is one thing, getting them published is another. Do you need an agent, previous publications? We're going to talk about all of that in this video. Hi, I'm Megan. I'm a professional writer, published author, and writing coach, and I love helping frustrated writers hone their process so they can finish their projects and meet their goals. I recently had a short story published, so I wanted to give you a few tips on what to do if you're looking to get published too. The market for short stories is actually pretty strong, I would say, and there are a few reasons why I prefer it to the novel market. First, you do not need an agent to get a short story published, which is a big win. Second, you don't need any prior publications to get your short story picked up. I think it probably helps to have a few publications under your belt, but that being said, you really don't need it in order to get published, which is awesome. Your story just needs to be good, and it needs to be the right fit for the publication you're sending it to. Think of it kind of like you're sending your story out on a job application. You want to make sure you're applying your story to jobs, publications that it's well suited for. Third, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of options on where to submit your story, whether it's a contest or a magazine, independent press, big name press, the list goes on and on. Which brings us to where to find presses and magazines and contests to submit to. So if you're anything like me, maybe you started out looking for local presses and local magazines, or just Google searching open submissions for romantic stories or horror fiction or whatnot. That'll take you down a lot of rabbit trails and it's really time consuming. But there are a few submission platforms you can use that make the process a lot easier. The main one I'm going to be talking about today is Submittable, but I'll touch a little bit on Duotrope as well. So here's what you see when you first log into Submittable. You won't have anything there under My Submissions if you haven't used it before. At the top, you'll see Submissions, Discover, Saved, and Following. Those basically show where you're going to find your submissions, where you're going to discover open submissions you can submit to, where to find the presses or the contests that you've saved, or where you're going to find the ones that you're following. So here you'll see my submissions. Some have been declined. That one was withdrawn in the middle because my story got picked up elsewhere. So if we go over here to Discover, so here's where you'll see all the open submissions, whether they have no deadlines or deadlines. On the left-hand side, you see when they're due. So these are usually short story or fiction contests. And then over here, you'll see kind of the title of the submission, maybe a short description. So if we click on one of these, we see a little bit more information about what they're looking for, the contest winnings, the different types of stories that they're accepting and when they're due. You see up there submit and save. You can click out of that. If you go up here to the search bar, this is where you'll be doing the work of narrowing down who to send it to. So you'll see different kinds of genres, different kinds of keywords and topics you can click on to narrow down your search. Let's click on short story. Maybe I'll add a couple more tags like fiction. Maybe I'll add another one, contest. You know, you can add a whole bunch. You can type in your own. And then it'll give you a list of, oh, well, that one didn't have anything. So let's get rid of one of those. There we go. Okay. So now you can see all of the short story fiction contests that are open. So let's click on one of these. So you can click on the press up here, the name, and say visit website. And this is where you'll get a sense of, okay, what are these guys about? What kinds of things do they publish? And you can maybe even read part of their catalog. Okay, and then let's click out of there. And that's pretty much the gist of Submittable when you are looking for presses to submit to. So let's see what it looks like when you go to submit a story. So we'll click on this one, and then you go up here and you click submit. Then it takes you kind of the form that you'll fill out to submit your story. So it's really user-friendly. You can read a little bit more about the contest again. Always make sure to note if they charge you a fee. This one is $14, so, you know, be ready for that. Most of them do. You fill in your first and last name, the type of fiction or story you're submitting, and then this one asks for a bio, and that's where you upload your story. You can also get feedback from the editor. I really like doing that, but it is more expensive, so I don't usually opt for that, but it's a nice feature. And then you submit at the bottom, or you can save it as a draft. Let's take a look at one more. So down here, you'll see kind of a similar outline. They ask for a title on this one and the cover letter. So we will get to that later, but some will ask for a bio, some will ask for a cover letter. And then similarly, you choose a file. This one doesn't have the editing option, and then you go to your payment method. So that's Submittable. It has a really user-friendly interface and makes finding places to submit so much easier. I love using it. And as far as I know, it's completely free, so get on there, make an account, and have at it. Now let's talk a little bit about Duotrope. Okay, so Duotrope is where my story got picked up, and it's really similar to Submittable, but it's not free, unfortunately. It kind of stinks. They have a membership requirement. They do have a free trial, but once you use your free trial, it's, I think, $5 a month or $50 a year in order to become a member, which isn't too bad, but it's up to you. So unfortunately, I can't show you what the portal looks like anymore, but it is very similar to Submittable. I found my publisher, again, by kind of using the filters. I think I searched for short fiction, literary fiction, and then I think I also filtered it through certain themes like grieving, Florida, things like that, because that's what my story kind of was about. All right, so now you know how to find the publishers, but how do you pick one that's perfect for your story? A lot of writers will tell you, and there is some merit to this, I think, but a lot of writers will tell you to read through a bunch of publications. You should be really familiar with the press and the kinds of things that they publish. And I agree to some extent, like it's kind of like applying for a job, but you didn't read anything about the job description or the company. It doesn't look the greatest, right? You don't really know whether you're a good fit. So the same thing kind of goes for your story. Like if you're just blindly throwing your story out there to publishers, it's kind of a waste of your time and theirs because your story just may not be a good fit for them. But I think when you're first starting out, it can be really overwhelming to think, okay, before I submit, I have to spend hours and hours or hundreds of dollars buying these subscriptions so that I can read through past issues so I can get a sense of whether my story is a similar style. And I know for me that stopped me from submitting for a while because I was like, I just don't have the time to do that right now. So what I did was, through using Submittable and Duotrope, I found certain publishers that I thought, okay, they're looking for stories that are similar to mine. Let me look into their press a little bit more. And so I'd go to their website and I'd read through what they're all about and the kinds of stories they published, and that gave me a sense of, okay, I think my story could fit in here pretty well. So while I think it's important to read publications from the presses that you're looking into, I think that kind of understanding of who takes what kind of work builds up over time. So just do a little bit here, a little bit there, and before you know it, you'll have kind of a mental backlog of where you could submit certain types of stories. Okay, so we've looked at how to use a platform like Submittable to submit your story, but I haven't touched on a key part of the process, which is writing a cover letter or a bio. So I actually took a course at UCLA Extension that was extremely helpful with this, so I'm going to tell you what I learned through that course. This is not a job application cover letter, it's not your college admissions essay, it's not a full resume about your life. It's 1 to 2 paragraphs max, giving just enough information for the publisher to get a sense of what your story is about, who you are, and then move on. So you want no fluff, just the basics, and here are some things that you can include. 1 to 2 lines on what you're submitting. Include your story's name and a brief hint at its theme. 1 line about your educational background if you studied English or creative writing or another related field. If you studied engineering and it's not pertinent to your story or anything else, don't put it in. They don't need to know. 1 line about your work background, again, if it's related. For instance, you work as a copywriter, or you work for a publishing house, or you work as an editor. Or maybe if you're writing a story about engineers and you're submitting it to a press that only publishes stories about engineers and you work as an engineer, then it would be related. You'll also, and this is key, you'll also want to let them know if you're submitting your story to other places. This is called a simultaneous submission. It's good to let them know it's considered good manners because then they know that it might be picked up somewhere else. Then, if you've been published before, definitely include that. Very briefly. You don't need to go into a whole description about the things you've published and where and how long they were and how successful they were. But if you've won any awards or been published, definitely include that. Then, of course, make sure you thank them somewhere in the letter and sign off, and that's it. So here's the letter I used when I submitted my short story. So I'm going to go in here and click on my previous submission, scroll it on down, and you'll see the letter that I wrote to them. So it's Dear Florida Review Editors, Thank you for considering my short story, Lightning on the Lake, for your upcoming issue. It describes an unorthodox way of dealing with grief set during a stormy Florida summer. This is a simultaneous submission, and I will notify you if the story is accepted for publication elsewhere. I have a Bachelor of Arts in English from the University of Toronto and enjoy writing work revolving around grief, transitions, and experiences of transcendence. Thank you again for your consideration. Sincerely, Megan McLean. So you'll notice that, okay, I start obviously by saying, Dear Florida Review editors, I don't know who the exact editor is who'll be reading it, so it's okay to just use a general introduction, a general salutation. And then I go into thank you immediately. Thank you for considering my short story. I'm able to put the title in, and then I give one very brief sentence that kind of sums up what my story is about. Then I say this is a simultaneous submission. Again, really important to let them know that I'm submitting it elsewhere, and we'll let them know if it's accepted. I added in my degree because it's a relevant degree. I studied English. And I added in my school because it's a good school. And then one little tidbit about me that kind of pertains to the stories, things that I like to write about. Maybe they're interested in that. I thank them again, and I sign off, and that's it. So that's a submission cover letter, but what about a bio? For bios, I say similarly, keep it simple, and make sure you write it in the third person. You can include your education, your work background, any accolades or publications as well, and then toss in a few personal tidbits that connect you to the story or add a little humor or personality to it. So here's the one that I used for the anthology I was published in. So you'll see I included my background, my work history, and a few personal details that kind of connected me to my story. You know, I run a lot, I'm from Florida. My only frustration with this bio is that I said it was my fiction debut when technically I've had a poem published before, but I guess that's poetry. Is that separate from fiction, right? I think it's fine. All right, whatever. So overall tip for bios, keep it simple and straightforward. Don't add adjectives or your own interpretation of your work or your history. Like, you know, Megan writes flowing prose that drips off the page like drops of honey onto our eyes as we read it. Like, don't do that. Don't do that. Okay, so there you go. A little walkthrough on how to submit a short story. I was really excited that I implemented the things that I learned and it worked. So I hope you can glean a little bit of insight from my experience too. You should be able to navigate a submission platform, narrow down who to submit to, and write a killer cover letter. My final tip is to make sure you're sending in the very best draft. I think I worked on about 7 drafts of my story, and I had anywhere from 3 to 5 people, I think, read it. So make sure you're sending a polished piece of writing because that will better your odds of getting it picked up. And if you have any other questions about things that I did, what happens after your story gets selected, or anything else about publishing a short story, leave me a comment below and we can talk about it. But as always, if you want more tips on how to hone your process so you can meet your writing goals, hit the subscribe button and I'll see you next time. Bye!